My dad planned to send me to a therapeutic boarding school after his new wife claimed I was mentally unstable, until I recorded her admitting she'd been drugging me with Benadryl and gaslighting me to get me out of the house. He kicked her out, but 6 months later we caught her targeting my chemistry teacher the same way. My father had been distant for several weeks, displaying troubled expressions, engaging in quiet telephone conversations, and attending meetings with unfamiliar experts. Meanwhile, his new spouse, Lauren, recorded my every action, consistently observing me during my lowest points. Eventually, Dad approached me directly on Sunday evening, stating, "Darling, we must discuss something. Things aren't progressing well." I set aside my schoolwork and inquired about his meaning. "You're having difficulties, dear. Lauren has been monitoring your occurrences, and I'm concerned about your psychological well-being." I surveyed my bedroom, noting that everything remained precisely as I'd arranged it, because I'd begun capturing images of my surroundings each dawn. "Dad, I haven't experienced any such incidents." He retrieved his mobile device, remarking, "This isn't merely about today, it's a recurring trend." Lauren expresses apprehension regarding your composure. At that moment, Lauren materialized in my doorway, as if she had been listening to our exchange. "Forgive me, I couldn't help overhearing," she uttered with feigned solicitude. "Your father is simply attempting to secure appropriate assistance for you." I felt my chest becoming constricted. Appropriate assistance? I'm achieving top grades and holding a part-time job. Lauren emitted a sigh. Scholastic achievement does not signify sound mental health. "Since when are you qualified to provide a diagnosis?" I questioned. Dad intervened between us. "Look, I've located a therapeutic residential school, a place with structure. You'll commence attendance following the winter break." I gazed at him. We had cohabited since Mom passed away. Just the two of us for 3 years. "Are you truly sending me away because your wife believes I'm unbalanced?" "I'm sending you to a secure environment because you're spiraling, and it's impacting everyone," Dad asserted. That night, slumber eluded me, as something about the entire circumstance felt amiss, given that Dad had never questioned my psychological state prior to Lauren's arrival 6 months ago. The subsequent morning, Dad departed for his occupation, and Lauren remained present, which was peculiar since she had a real estate viewing scheduled. Around 10 o'clock, I overheard her on the phone in their sleeping quarters and began recording. "I cannot wait until she is gone. David has no inkling I've been relocating her possessions and fabricating these incidents. Once she is at the residential school, I'll persuade him she requires extended residential treatment." A chill ran through my veins as I realized she was manufacturing my instability to eliminate me. But it worsened. The most favorable aspect is that I've been secretly adding Benadryl to her beverages, rendering her drowsy and disoriented. David presumes she's dissociating. I even concealed pills in her knapsack last week. I continued recording as she chuckled about her manipulation. "David is so protective. He genuinely believes his faultless daughter is experiencing a breakdown when it has been me all along." That evening, Dad arrived home to discover me seated at our kitchen table with my laptop open. "Feeling better?" he inquired cautiously. "Dad, please be seated. There's something you need to hear." Lauren emerged from their bedroom. "What is transpiring?" I initiated the recording, and Dad's countenance cycled through approximately 5 distinct emotions as he listened to his wife's voice detailing her entire scheme to remove and institutionalize me. When it concluded, the dwelling was utterly silent. "David, darling, I can explain," Lauren began. "Depart," Dad stated softly. "What?" "Depart," he bellowed. "Gather your belongings and exit my residence immediately." Lauren attempted to argue, but Dad was already collecting her items and tossing them into a bag. "You medicated my daughter. You led me to believe my precious girl was unwell." As Dad propelled Lauren toward the exit, she turned to me with unadulterated animosity. "This is entirely your fault. You have ruined everything." "No," Dad countered. "You attempted to abduct my daughter from me. We are finished." After her departure, Dad collapsed onto the sofa, his head buried in his hands. "Sweetheart, I am profoundly sorry. I nearly sent you away based on her falsehoods. She manipulated both of us flawlessly." I replied, the bewilderment, the apprehensions, turning you against me. It was all meticulously planned. Dad looked up. "How did you discern it?" "Something didn't align. You never worried about me before her arrival." Dad located pills she had concealed in my jewelry box, fabricated incident reports in his study, even a counterfeit diary entry in my handwriting that she had intended to discover. "I cannot believe I succumbed to this," Dad uttered. I responded, "She is a skilled manipulator. This was not your culpability." 6 months later, Dad and I are more closely bonded than ever, and we have a regulation that future romantic partners require both our endorsement. Last week, we encountered Lauren at a coffee establishment with a new gentleman, and our mouths fell open because this was not merely some new acquaintance. This was one of my instructors. Lauren had returned. I froze right there in the coffee shop. Lauren noticed us at the same instant, and her hand moved to touch my teacher's arm in that possessive manner I recalled all too well. My stomach churned as Mr. Henderson smiled down at her, completely oblivious to the predicament he had entered. Dad grasped my elbow and guided me toward the exit. We reached the vehicle before either of us articulated a word. He clutched the steering wheel so forcefully his knuckles turned pallid. "We must caution him," I stated. Dad shook his head. "He will not credit us." Recall how I did not credit you. That night, I lay in bed gazing at the ceiling. Mr. Henderson taught my AP chemistry course. He was one of those educators everyone admired because he genuinely cared about his pupils. Now Lauren had ensnared him, and I knew precisely what would ensue. The subsequent Monday, I entered chemistry class to find Lauren seated in the foremost row. She wore a visitor's identification and held a clipboard, making notations while Mr. Henderson elucidated molecular bonds. Her gaze found mine instantly, and she offered that deceptive, pleasant smile I had grown to despise. "Class, we have a distinguished guest today," Mr. Henderson announced. "My girlfriend Lauren is observing as part of her educational psychology research." My classmates murmured their greetings while I sank lower in my seat. Lauren's investigation was already commencing. Throughout the instruction, I observed her writing feverishly whenever I responded to a query or shifted in my chair. When I requested to use the lavatory, she made another notation. By the time class concluded, her clipboard was half filled. I attempted to depart swiftly, but Mr. Henderson summoned me back. "Can you remain for a moment? Lauren has certain apprehensions." My pulse quickened as my classmates exited. Lauren stood beside Mr. Henderson's desk, her hand resting on his shoulder. "I detected some troubling behaviors today," she commenced, consulting her notes. "Fidgeting, difficulty maintaining eye contact, leaving class unnecessarily." Mr. Henderson frowned. "She requested to use the restroom once." "It's a pattern," Lauren insisted. "I've been researching adolescent psychological disorders, and these are archetypal warning indicators." I clenched my fists. "Warning indicators of what precisely?" Lauren's eyes gleamed. "I am not qualified to diagnose, but I believe we should oversee the situation for your own welfare." Mr. Henderson appeared uneasy. "I haven't observed anything concerning in my class." "Sometimes an external viewpoint assists," Lauren remarked, squeezing his shoulder. "I'm merely attempting to assist." I left that meeting feeling unwell. She was initiating the same stratagem all over again, but this time utilizing my instructor as her instrument. Over the next 2 weeks, Lauren appeared in more of my classes. She persuaded Mr. Henderson that observing my entire academic day would furnish valuable data. Educators who had never questioned my conduct suddenly began inquiring if I was feeling well. My English teacher pulled me aside after Lauren observed her class. "Lauren mentioned you seemed distracted today. Is everything satisfactory at home?" I wished to scream that Lauren was the issue, but I merely nodded and stated I was fine. Who would believe that my chemistry teacher's romantic partner was pursuing me throughout the school? The most distressing aspect was witnessing Mr. Henderson's transformation. He used to jest with students and remain after class to aid anyone struggling. Now he scrutinized me constantly, making notations when I shifted in my seat or took too long to answer a question. Lauren had corrupted another relationship in my existence. One Thursday, I remained after school to work on a laboratory assignment. The science wing was mostly vacant when I heard voices from Mr. Henderson's classroom. I approached stealthily and recognized Lauren's voice. "She's deteriorating." Today, she was practically motionless during the lecture. "She seemed engaged to me," Mr. Henderson replied. "She answered several questions accurately." That's precisely it. She transitions from withdrawn to excessively eager for attention. It's textbook behavioral instability. I retrieved my phone and began recording, just as before. "Perhaps we should involve her father," Mr. Henderson suggested. Lauren's voice became sharp. "David is too closely involved to perceive it clearly. He almost sent her away last time, but she manipulated him into believing I was the problem." "Last time? Oh, I neglected to mention, I was previously married to David. We divorced because she turned him against me with falsehoods and fabricated evidence. She is perilously manipulative." My hands trembled as I recorded her distorting our history. She was portraying me as the antagonist in her own twisted narrative. "That's unsettling," Mr. Henderson stated slowly. "Should I report this to the administration?" "Not yet. Allow me to accumulate more evidence first. I'm documenting everything for her own safeguarding." I had heard sufficient. I hurried away before they could discover me, my thoughts racing. Lauren wasn't merely attempting to convince people I was unstable. She was constructing a case that I was perilous. That evening, I showed Dad the recording. His face paled as he listened to Lauren's fabrications. She's repeating her actions, he stated. But this time, she's more cunning. She's not directly targeting you through me. She's utilizing the school system. I remarked, if instructors begin reporting apprehensions, it won't matter what we assert. Dad paced our living area. We need to be more astute, too. Last time you caught her admitting everything, but she won't make that error again. He was correct. Lauren had learned from her failure. This time she was generating a paper trail through legitimate channels. Teachers' concerns carried significance. If enough of them reported issues, social services might become involved. What do we do? I inquired. Dad sat beside me on the sofa. We document everything, just as before. But this time, we require allies. The following day, I approached my guidance counselor, Mrs. Chun. She had known me since my freshman year and had composed one of my college endorsement letters. May I speak with you about something personal? I asked. She welcomed me into her office. I recounted everything about Lauren, showing her the older recordings and the recent one. Mrs. Chun listened without interruption, her expression growing more troubled with each detail. This is grave, she stated when I concluded. Has she made any direct menaces? No, she's too clever for that. She's simply implanting seeds of doubt everywhere. Mrs. Chun made notations. I'll monitor the situation. If any teachers approach me with apprehensions about you, I'll comprehend the true account. Having one adult on my side provided assistance, but Lauren's campaign persisted. She began appearing at my extracurricular activities, clipboard in hand. She observed my shift at the local bookstore, informing my manager she was conducting a workplace psychology investigation. She even materialized at my friend Sarah's residence during our study group. Your teacher's girlfriend is exceptionally peculiar, Sarah informed me later. She kept inquiring if you seemed different recently. The strain was mounting. Teachers regarded me differently. Friends began asking if I was well. Lauren was fabricating the illusion of apprehension from every direction. 3 weeks into her campaign, I made an error. I was fatigued from constantly being scrutinized and recorded. During chemistry class, I inadvertently overturned a beaker containing a harmless solution. It fractured on the floor, and I immediately began clearing it up. Stop, Lauren commanded from her observation post. No one move. This could be hazardous. Mr. Henderson rushed over. It's merely diluted sodium chloride, essentially saline. But Lauren was already capturing photographs of the incident with her phone. Protocol mandates documenting any laboratory mishaps, she stated for safety records. I knew those images would be distorted into proof of my instability and perilous conduct in class. I was playing directly into her hands. That afternoon, Mr. Henderson asked me to remain after class again. This time, Lauren waited outside, affording us privacy while staying close enough to dictate the narrative. I'm concerned about your concentration lately, he began. The beaker incident today, combined with other observations. It was an accident, I interjected. I knocked it over reaching for my notebook. He sighed. I know, but Lauren believes the stress might be impacting your coordination and judgment. She suggested you might benefit from a reduced course load. My grades are flawless, I protested. One mishap doesn't signify I'm disintegrating. No one is asserting you're disintegrating, he stated carefully. We simply wish to support you. I left that meeting feeling ensnared. Lauren was tightening the snare, and I could perceive no escape. She had learned from her missteps, and this time, her scheme was succeeding. That night, Dad and I sat at the kitchen table devising a strategy. We had filled a notebook with documentation of Lauren's surveillance, but it felt like playing defense while she dictated the game. Perhaps I should confront her, Dad suggested. Tell her to desist. She'll record it and twist your words, I replied. Make it appear as though you're harassing her. We both knew I was correct. Lauren had positioned herself flawlessly. A concerned romantic partner conducting legitimate research, while we appeared to be the embittered former family attempting to meddle with her new relationship. There must be something we can undertake, Dad stated. I gazed at our notebook filled with evidence. Last time, Lauren's conceit had been her undoing. She had boasted about her scheme, assuming she had already triumphed. This time, she was cautious. But perhaps that careful facade concealed the same arrogance. What if we don't await her misstep? I said slowly. What if we engineer a situation where she is compelled to reveal her true nature? Dad leaned forward. What are you contemplating? She's cultivated this image of being concerned and professional, but beneath it, she's still the same individual who drugged me and attempted to dismantle our family. If we pressed the correct buttons, she might break. Dad concluded. It was perilous. If we pushed too forcefully, we would appear to be the aggressors. But if we did nothing, Lauren would gradually poison my entire existence until everyone credited her falsehoods. We need to be astute about this, Dad stated. One chance to expose her, or she prevails. I considered Mr. Henderson. How he transformed from the instructor who encouraged everyone to someone who observed me with suspicion. Lauren had seized something beneficial and twisted it into her weapon. Perhaps it was time to twist it back. I spent the weekend analyzing Lauren's patterns from both instances she had targeted our family. She invariably commenced subtly, building credibility before escalating. She documented obsessively, generating evidence trails that appeared legitimate to outsiders. Most significantly, she relied on people's natural inclination to trust concerned figures of authority. Monday morning arrived with a fresh development. Mrs. Chun pulled me aside before first period, her countenance serious. She explained that 3 instructors had already submitted informal apprehension reports about my conduct, all citing Lauren's observations. The administration was considering mandatory counseling sessions. I felt the confines closing in again, but this time I had a strategy forming. Lauren's vulnerability was her need for dominion and her conviction that she was more intelligent than everyone else. If I could disrupt her meticulously orchestrated narrative, she might expose herself. During chemistry class, I intentionally answered every question accurately, participated actively, and assisted my laboratory partner with calculations. Lauren scribbled furiously on her clipboard, clearly exasperated by my exemplary performance. Mr. Henderson appeared bewildered by the discrepancy between my behavior and Lauren's reports. After class, I approached Mr. Henderson with a meticulously prepared request. I explained that I wished to undertake an extra credit project on behavioral psychology, specifically concentrating on observer bias in educational environments. His eyes brightened at my academic initiative, though Lauren's expression darkened from across the room. That afternoon, I implemented the subsequent phase. I asked Mrs. Chun to arrange a conference with all my instructors, explaining that I wished to directly address their apprehensions. She consented, impressed by my mature approach to the situation. The meeting occurred Wednesday after school. 6 teachers assembled in the conference room, including Mr. Henderson. Lauren was not invited, but I knew she would learn about it immediately. I arrived prepared with my grade reports, attendance records, and testimonials from my employer regarding my work performance. I presented my case systematically, demonstrating consistent academic excellence and positive conduct reports from before Lauren's observations commenced. Several teachers exchanged glances, beginning to discern the pattern. My English teacher admitted she had only noticed problems after Lauren highlighted them. Mr. Henderson remained silent throughout, his jaw tightening as the evidence accumulated. When the meeting concluded, most teachers seemed persuaded that perhaps they had been influenced by external observations. But I knew Lauren would not accept this setback quietly. Unsurprisingly, Thursday brought escalation. I arrived at school to find my locker door slightly ajar. Nothing was missing, but several items had been rearranged. My chemistry notebook was on the incorrect shelf, and my calculator was in my jacket pocket instead of my backpack. Subtle alterations that only I would notice. During lunch, Sarah mentioned that someone had been inquiring of other students about my conduct. The questions were framed as casual solicitude, but they implanted seeds of doubt. Had I seemed stressed recently? Was I behaving differently? Several classmates began observing me with curious expressions. I documented everything on my phone, creating my own evidence trail. Dad did likewise at home, noting times when items were mysteriously moved or when he received anonymous, concerned parental emails about my well-being. We were constructing our case, but Lauren was proceeding more rapidly. Friday afternoon brought the confrontation I had anticipated. Mr. Henderson asked me to remain after class, and this time Lauren was already in the room. She sat behind his desk as if she belonged there, clipboard in hand and expression sympathetic. Mr. Henderson appeared uncomfortable as he began explaining that Lauren had compiled unsettling data about my behavioral patterns. She had created graphs illustrating my erratic class participation, charts documenting my suspicious lavatory breaks, and photographs of normal adolescent conduct labeled as warning indicators. I listened calmly, then retrieved my own folder. Inside were my recordings of Lauren's conversations, documentation of her surveillance behavior, and most importantly, a printed email I discovered in the school's public records request. It showed Lauren had attempted this exact same pattern at her previous employment in another state. Mr. Henderson's countenance altered as he reviewed the materials. Lauren's facade slipped for just a moment, revealing the cold calculation beneath. She swiftly recovered, suggesting that I was diverting attention from my own issues by assailing her credibility. The tension in the room was stifling. Mr. Henderson looked between us, clearly torn between his romantic partner and mounting evidence of her deceit. I knew this was the pivotal moment, but pushing too forcefully would backfire. Instead, I made a simple request. I asked Mr. Henderson to authenticate Lauren's credentials and previous employment. I suggested he contact her references independently, not utilizing the numbers she provided. His expression indicated he was beginning to harbor doubts. Lauren's rejoinder was swift and malicious. By Monday morning, rumors were circulating about my violent outburst in chemistry class. Students who were not even present claimed to have witnessed me menacing Lauren. Someone had posted on the school's anonymous gossip page about my mental health crisis. Dad received calls from concerned parents who had heard their children discussing my perilous conduct. The school administration scheduled an emergency meeting to discuss my suitability to remain in regular classes. Lauren had shifted tactics from subtle manipulation to full character assassination. I felt as though I was submerging in falsehoods, but Mrs. Chun remained steadfast. She had been documenting the chronology of events and noticed something crucial. Every escalation followed immediately after I had made progress in exposing Lauren. The pattern was too consistent to be coincidental. Tuesday's emergency meeting included the principal, vice principal, several teachers, and my father. Lauren attended as Mr. Henderson's support person, positioning herself as a concerned observer rather than the architect of the crisis. She had prepared a presentation complete with charts, graphs, and carefully edited photographs. Dad came prepared, too. He had engaged a private investigator over the weekend who had unearthed Lauren's history. 3 previous relationships had concluded with similar patterns, the methodical destruction of anyone who jeopardized her dominion. 2 former husbands had lost custody of their offspring after being portrayed as unstable. A stepdaughter in another state had been institutionalized based on Lauren's apprehensions. The room fell silent as Dad presented the investigator's findings. Lauren's countenance remained composed, but her knuckles were white as she clutched her clipboard. She attempted to dismiss the information as irrelevant to the current situation, but doubt was disseminating throughout the room. Mr. Henderson looked physically unwell as he processed the information. He had been completely deceived by Lauren's performance, just as Dad had been. The principal called for a recess during which fervent discussions could be heard from the hallway. When the meeting resumed, the principal announced that all behavioral apprehensions about me would be suspended pending a full investigation. Lauren's observational privileges were immediately revoked. She would no longer be permitted on school property without official business. Lauren's composure finally fractured. She accused the school of failing to safeguard students, threatened legal action, and claimed I had manipulated everyone just as I had manipulated my father. Her tirade grew increasingly deranged as she realized her scheme was unraveling. Mr. Henderson attempted to pacify her, but she turned on him, too. She accused him of being feeble, of choosing a manipulative adolescent over her professional judgment. The facade had completely disintegrated, revealing the narcissistic fury underneath. Security was summoned to escort Lauren from the premises. As she was let out, she locked eyes with me one last time. The animosity there was pure and undiluted. I knew this was not over. Lauren did not accept defeat gracefully. The subsequent few days were surreal. Mr. Henderson took personal leave to process what had transpired. Students who had disseminated rumors apologized, admitting they had been ensnared in the drama. Teachers expressed regret for doubting me. But I could not relax because I knew Lauren was still at large, planning her next maneuver. Dad increased security at our residence, installing cameras and replacing all the locks. We altered our routines and remained vigilant. The private investigator cautioned us that Lauren's pattern included extinction bursts, final desperate attempts to regain control when her plans failed. Predictably, Friday brought pandemonium. I arrived at school to discover my car tires slashed in the student parking area. Security footage mysteriously malfunctioned during the time frame when it occurred. Dad's office received anonymous grievances about his parenting. My employer received calls alleging I had been pilfering from the register. Each assault was deniable, impossible to substantiate Lauren was behind them. She was too cunning to leave direct proof, but the pattern was evident to anyone paying attention. She was attempting to render our lives sufficiently miserable that we would relocate, eliminating the witnesses to her true character. Mrs. Chun assisted me in filing reports for each incident, establishing an official paper trail. The principal augmented security patrols around the school. My employer, who had known me for 2 years, dismissed the anonymous complaints as obvious harassment. Gradually, Lauren's assaults were being neutralized by the support network we had constructed. The breakthrough originated from an unforeseen source. Mr. Henderson returned to school the following Monday, appearing exhausted but resolute. He requested to speak with Dad and me privately after school. In Mrs. Chen's office, he presented what he had uncovered during his week of contemplation. Lauren had been utilizing his computer to access student records, contravening numerous privacy statutes. She had created counterfeit social media accounts to propagate rumors and had used his school email to dispatch concerned messages to parents. He had found drafts of letters recommending my immediate psychiatric evaluation awaiting dispatch on his official letterhead. Most incriminating of all, He had found her actual laptop concealed in his apartment. On it were meticulous plans for dismantling my family dating back to before she had even encountered him. I was listed as the primary impediment to her objective of marrying into wealth and stability. She had researched Dad extensively, learned about Mom's demise, and crafted her approach accordingly. Mr. Henderson had already contacted law enforcement and an attorney. While criminal charges might be arduous to substantiate, the evidence was sufficient for restraining orders and civil litigation. He apologized profusely for his role in her scheme, though we assured him he was a casualty, too. That evening, Lauren made her ultimate move. She appeared at our residence despite the security measures, pounding on the door and screaming about injustice. Dad summoned the police while I recorded everything from my bedroom window. She ranted about how we had ruined her existence, how she had only wished to assist, how ungrateful we were for her solicitude. The police arrived swiftly, having been briefed on the situation. Lauren attempted to charm them at first, portraying the concerned former wife worried about a troubled adolescent. But when they requested her departure, she erupted. She accused them of corruption, threatened lawsuits, and had to be physically restrained when she lunged toward our front door. As the police vehicle drove away with Lauren in the back seat, Dad and I stood in our doorway observing. We were both trembling from adrenaline and relief. The woman who had nearly destroyed our family twice was finally confronting the repercussions of her actions. The subsequent weeks brought a peculiar kind of tranquility. Lauren was charged with harassment, stalking, and making false reports. The restraining orders were granted immediately. Mr. Henderson testified about her utilization of his position to access student records. Other victims from her past came forward, bolstering the case against her. I reverted to being a typical high school student, concentrating on my grades and college applications. The drama became stale news as other scandals captivated people's attention. Some classmates still gave me curious glances, but most had moved on to other interests. Mr. Henderson gradually reverted to his former self, jesting with students and remaining late to assist with challenging concepts. He apologized to me privately several times, but I assured him I did not blame him. Lauren had deceived many intelligent individuals over the years. He was merely her latest victim. Dad and I grew even closer through the ordeal. We had learned to trust each other's instincts and communicate openly about apprehensions. He dated occasionally, but always introduced prospective partners to me early, watching for any warning signs we might have overlooked previously. The legal proceedings protracted for months, but Lauren eventually accepted a plea agreement. She received probation, mandatory counseling, and stringent restraining orders, keeping her away from our family and Mr. Henderson. It was not the dramatic justice we might have desired, but it was sufficient to keep her out of our lives. One afternoon, while organizing my college application materials, I discovered the notebook where I had documented Lauren's initial campaign against me. Reading through it, I was struck by how much I had matured. The frightened adolescent who had almost been sent away had become someone who could discern manipulation and resist it. Dad found me reading and sat beside me. We conversed about the patterns we had missed the first time, the warning signs we would disregard in the future. He admitted that loneliness after Mom's passing had rendered him susceptible to Lauren's initial allure. I understood we had both been grieving in our own ways. As senior year progressed, the Lauren saga became just another chapter in our family's narrative. We had survived loss, treachery, and attempted annihilation. But we had also unearthed our own fortitude and the potency of truth over manipulation. The experience had imparted valuable lessons about trust, vigilance, and the significance of listening to one another. Mr. Henderson eventually began dating again, this time with someone who had no interest in psychology or student observation. He joked that he developed an aversion to clipboards and behavioral charts. The chemistry class atmosphere reverted to its previous warmth, with students feeling secure to make errors without being psychoanalyzed. I sometimes pondered what propelled someone like Lauren to such extremes. The private investigator's report had unveiled a pattern extending back decades, a trail of shattered relationships and damaged lives. But comprehending her motivations did not excuse her actions or diminish the harm she had inflicted. The restraining order hearing was scheduled for the subsequent week. Dad and I spent hours organizing our evidence, creating a timeline of Lauren's harassment that spanned 2 separate attempts to dismantle our family. Mrs. Chun provided written declarations about the school incidents, while Mr. Henderson compiled documentation of Lauren's unauthorized access to student records. 3 days before the hearing, I noticed a vehicle following me home from work. It remained precisely 2 cars behind, turning wherever I turned. My hands trembled on the steering wheel as I took an unexpected detour through a residential district. The car continued following. Instead of proceeding home, I drove directly to the police station and parked in their lot. The car sped past without halting, but I caught a glimpse of the driver. It was not Lauren, but I recognized him from her social media photographs as her brother. I filed another report, adding it to our expanding collection. The officer taking my statement mentioned they had been receiving similar reports from Dad's workplace. Someone had been asking questions about his schedule, pretending to be a client. The harassment was escalating, but now it involved other individuals performing Lauren's unsavory work. That evening, Dad installed a new security system with cameras covering every angle of our property. We altered our routines again, taking different routes and varying our schedules. I began carpooling with Sarah to avoid being alone in parking areas. The unceasing vigilance was exhausting, but we could not lower our guard. The night before the hearing, neither of us slept soundly. I kept checking the security cameras on my phone, watching for any movement outside. Around 3 o'clock in the morning, motion sensors triggered an alert. The cameras showed someone in dark attire approaching our front door. They stood there for several minutes, unmoving, merely gazing at the house. Then they deposited something on our doorstep and vanished into the darkness. Dad summoned the police before either of us ventured outside. When officers arrived, they found a manila envelope containing printed screenshots of my social media accounts with certain posts circled in red marker. Normal adolescent photographs and comments had been annotated with psychological terminology, fabricating the illusion of concerning behavioral patterns. It was Lauren's handwriting. The hearing itself was tense but straightforward. Lauren appeared with an attorney, dressed conservatively and maintaining a calm demeanor. She attempted to portray herself as a concerned educator who had been misunderstood and maligned for attempting to assist a troubled adolescent. Her lawyer argued that the restraining order was needless harassment of an innocent woman. Our attorney presented the evidence systematically. The recordings of Lauren admitting to medicating me, the documentation of her surveillance behavior at school, Mr. Henderson's testimony about her accessing student records, the private investigator's report demonstrating her pattern of conduct across multiple states, the recent harassment incidents, including the envelope left that morning. Lauren's composure fractured when the judge directly questioned her about the drugging admission. She claimed the recording was taken out of context, that she had been jesting, that I had edited it to incriminate her, but when pressed for specifics, her explanations became increasingly convoluted. Her attorney attempted to redirect, but the damage was done. The judge granted the restraining order with strict stipulations. Lauren was prohibited from approaching within 500 feet of our home, my school, or my workplace. She could not contact us directly or through third parties. Any infringement would result in immediate apprehension. The order also encompassed Dad's workplace and specifically mentioned that harassment through other individuals would be considered a violation. As we exited the courthouse, I felt a blend of relief and lingering apprehension. Legal safeguarding was important, but paper could not deter someone truly determined to inflict harm. Lauren's brother was waiting in the parking area, capturing photographs of us with his phone. Our attorney immediately documented this, cautioning him that his actions could be deemed harassment by proxy. The subsequent few weeks brought a deceptive tranquility. Lauren seemed to have receded, and life began returning to something resembling normalcy. I concentrated on my college applications, composing essays about resilience and the significance of trusting one's instincts. Dad began seeing a therapist to process everything that had transpired, encouraging me to do likewise. Mr. Henderson reached out one afternoon, inquiring if I would be comfortable meeting for coffee. He wished to apologize again and share some information he had discovered. We met at a bustling cafe downtown, both of us scanning the room for familiar faces before settling into a secluded booth. He showed me emails he had found in his account sent folder that he had not composed. Lauren had been impersonating him, dispatching messages to other teachers expressing apprehension about my conduct. She had created an entire false narrative utilizing his credibility. He had reported it to the school administration and altered all his passwords. But the breach of trust had profoundly shaken him. The conversation aided both of us in processing what we had experienced. He admitted feeling foolish for being manipulated so readily. I shared how the experience had altered my perspective on trust and relationships. We concurred that Lauren's capacity to exploit people's benevolent intentions was her most perilous characteristic. 2 months after the restraining order, I was accepted early decision to my ideal college 3 states away. The distance felt like a boon, an opportunity to commence anew where Lauren's shadow could not extend. Dad initially worried about me being so far from home, but we both knew that remaining local would entail constantly looking over our shoulders. Spring semester proceeded without significant incidents, though we remained vigilant. I caught fleeting glimpses of vehicles that resembled Lauren's brother's car, but they never followed or approached. Hang-up calls came to the house occasionally, always from different numbers. We documented everything but attempted not to allow it to dominate our lives. Graduation day arrived with perfect weather and cautious optimism. Dad engaged security for the ceremony after learning that restraining orders were challenging to enforce in large gatherings. I scanned the audience during the processional, relieved not to perceive any familiar threats. The ceremony passed peacefully, and I permitted myself to feel proud of enduring everything and still achieving my objectives. The summer before college became about preparation and recuperation. Dad and I took a road trip to campus, spending quality time together without the incessant stress of Lauren's presence. We conversed about boundaries, safety protocols, and the importance of trusting new individuals while remaining cognizant of warning signs. During orientation weekend, I found myself acutely aware of anyone who seemed overly interested in my background or asked intrusive questions. It required conscious effort to relax and afford people opportunities. My roommate proved to be wonderfully normal, focused on her pre-medical studies and oblivious to my past turmoil. I assimilated into college life gradually, forging new friendships and excelling in my classes. The distance from home felt liberating, though I telephoned Dad every few days to check in. He mentioned that the hang-up calls had ceased, and there had been no indications of Lauren or her associates. Thanksgiving break brought me home for the first time since August. The residence felt different, more serene. Dad had redecorated some rooms, eradicating any vestiges of Lauren's presence. He seemed lighter, too, having processed much of his culpability through therapy. We prepared meals together, viewed films, and savored the simple pleasure of feeling secure in our own dwelling. On my final night before returning to school, we sat in the living room perusing old photo albums, images of Mom, of more favorable times, of the life we had reconstructed after loss. Dad highlighted how much I had matured, not merely physically, but in fortitude and sagacity. The frightened girl who had almost been sent away to residential school had become a self-assured young woman. Back at college, I immersed myself in spring semester with renewed vigor. I joined clubs, achieved the dean's list, and even began dating someone who knew nothing about my past. It felt gratifying to be recognized for who I was becoming rather than what I had survived. One evening in April, Dad called with news. Lauren had been apprehended in another state for comparable harassment charges against a new family. The private investigator had been tracking her movements and alerted authorities when she began targeting a single father with an adolescent son. Her pattern was so consistent that prosecutors were constructing a stronger case utilizing evidence from multiple victims. The news brought complex emotions. Relief that she had been halted before dismantling another family. Indignation that it had taken so long for genuine repercussions to reach her. Sorrow for her new victims who had experienced even a fraction of what we had endured. But mostly, I felt a sense of finality. Finals week arrived with its customary pressure, but it felt manageable compared to everything else I had confronted. I submitted my last paper, packed up my dormitory room, and prepared for sophomore year. The girl who had once documented her belongings out of paranoia was now documenting memories with companions, academic accomplishments, and plans for the future. Dad picked me up from campus, and we drove home together, windows lowered, and music playing. We did not discuss Lauren or restraining orders or security cameras. Instead, we conversed about my major, his new advancement at work, and our plans for a summer holiday. The past would always be a component of our narrative, but it no longer defined our present. That evening, as we sat on the porch observing fireflies, I realized how far we had progressed. The woman who attempted to tear us apart had ultimately made us more robust. We had learned to trust our intuitions, safeguard each other, and construct a support network that no manipulator could demolish. Most significantly, we had learned that enduring was not merely about navigating the crisis, but about choosing to flourish despite it. The security cameras were still present, the restraining order still active, and we would probably always double-check locks and vary our routines. But these precautions had become background sound rather than the predominant melody of our lives. We had reclaimed our tranquility, our home, and our future. Lauren had forfeited everything in her pursuit of dominion, while we had gained wisdom, resilience, and an unbreakable bond. As summer stretched ahead, I felt genuinely optimistic for the first time in years. There would always be challenges and difficult individuals in the world, but I now knew I could face them. The girl who had concealed a recorder in her pocket had grown into someone who stood tall, articulated truth, and refused to allow anyone to diminish her radiance. And that transformation was worth every arduous moment it required. I am mini Fable Fever.